Hey, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Doug Denny, and I'm the Director of Technical Marketing for our dedicated infrastructure business unit here at Rackspace. And I've got a couple of subject matter experts with me here today to talk about dedicated single-tenant solutions and use cases that are optimized for security and consistent performance. Before I dive into some general housekeeping, I want to go ahead and introduce my first guest today. We've got Kevin Wise, a solution architect, and we've got Phil Sprofera, a product manager for our networking device group. So, hey, Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, certainly. Kevin Wise, as Doug had said, I'm a solutions architect out of Austin, Texas, focused primarily on enterprise Fortune 1000 companies with revenue of about 1.5 billion and above.
Awesome. And Phil, how about you?
Hi, Phil Sprofera, product manager for networking for Rackspace, based out of San Antonio, Texas.
Very cool. Thanks again for joining us today, guys. By the way, I just want to note to anyone on the audience today that this is the first of a long series of Google Hangouts that we'll be doing. So there are certainly kinks to work out. So anyone joining today, thank you. You are a trailblazer, and we appreciate you spending some time with us today. And same for you guys, Kevin and Phil. We're making this up as we go. I'm joking. But so a couple things. So although we've hosted a series of cloud Google Hangouts for the last few years now, we still get a lot of questions from customers and prospects out in the wild about the role of dedicated infrastructure in this cloudy world, right? Like, you guys obviously still deliver a lot of that to your customers. You know, why? Shouldn't everything be on the cloud? So this is our first session to really dive into just that topic in a deeper way. We host these sessions on the second, third, and fourth Wednesday of every month. And each week we're going to focus on a different solution. And every month we'll have a different theme. And those themes include topics such as security, compliance, performance, cost effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera. In each session, we're going to talk about real-world architectures that were deployed for customers that we've worked with in the past. And we're going to give you the opportunity to access the architecture diagrams that we generated for those customers. Now, to be clear, we're not exposing customer information out to the market, right? Where these architectures are derivative of architectures that we generated for real customers, that we've scrubbed them, removed any information that might identify the customer and their infrastructure. We won't do that to our customers, right? But the takeaway is that, you know, we aren't just making these up in a back room somewhere talking abstractly about technology. We're taking real-world use cases and the real-world solutions that we develop to help our customers meet their goals. Quick note on Q&A. We have Q&A functionality here in the Google Hangout. So if you have questions at any time, please submit it through the Q&A tool in the Hangout. We won't actually address the questions until the end of the Hangout, so just a heads up on that. We're going to try and move through the discussion first. But again, at any point in time, just submit them, and I promise you we'll get to them as we move to the end. And then finally, if you have any questions, or if you're not watching this live, you're watching a recorded version of this broadcast, if you have any deeper questions that you want myself and the team to answer, send an email to customercare@rackspace.com. And to be clear, that goes to me and my team, so those of you watching this on demand can still connect with us and talk to us about the topics that we're discussing today. So one thing you should be able to see here, hang on a second. Before we get into the architecture first, I want to talk to Kevin a bit about this particular customer who we won't be naming. But in general, what was the problem that this customer was wrestling with, and what brought them to Rackspace?
Sure. Yeah. So for this customer specifically, it was a relative. You know, they were a brick and mortar, you know, domestic U.S. retailer, pretty well known, pretty large, but in this instance, they had no whatsoever web store e-commerce platform at all. So this was really their first big punch into the e-com kind of arena. They had a lot of concerns, as any given organization would, seeing the shift from buying in store to buying online. They were incredibly concerned about performance, security, and almost to the point where it almost got to paranoia. So as we kind of talk through the architecture, those will be two key themes: security and performance being two big reasons why they went fully dedicated.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So that I imagine that's a big leap for them, right? It's not
Right.
like they've been doing this on the web for years. This is their first foray into
Yeah.
business on the web, and
Exactly.
I could completely understand their concerns. And I'm flattered that we were one of the folks that they reached out to.
Mhm.
Do you have any insight into what options they were considering? Like, surely we weren't the only people they spoke to. I mean, I'd like it if we were, but
Yeah, I wish. No, that'd be awesome. No, so from a competitive scenario, I mean, they were looking at any major hoster, everything from those that could provide and spin up dedicated infrastructure, as well as those that could spin up, multi-tenant public cloud infrastructure. They wanted something that could meet their needs and scale above and beyond just what they looked at from an e-com or even analytics perspective.
okay. So there's pretty much white space, right? They had business non-functional requirements, right? But they definitely were looking for advice on the best approach. Is that
Exactly
something?
right.
Okay.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move into the architecture overview. Viewers should be able to see an architecture diagram available to them, and looks like we're presenting that now on the Hangout. So on-demand viewers should see this as we speak through the different components. I'm going to pull it up myself so I can see here as well. The first thing I notice here when I look at this logical architecture diagram is that it is pretty much all comprised of physical components. I see various servers that have different functions. I see dedicated physical network devices. What I don't know exactly, and you can help me, Kevin, is so what does this thing do? Right? What application is running on all of this infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. Effectively, it's Oracle Commerce, commonly referred to as ATG and DECA. But Oracle Commerce, given that they're such a large organization, had pretty big aspirations for what they're going to do online.
Mm-hmm.
They went with a very sophisticated and very capable platform that could scale to meet their needs on day one and certainly beyond. So it's all everything from test dev to production is predominantly really based upon the Oracle Commerce software stack.
Okay, very cool. And again, I note that this is all dedicated gear. I question about the app then. My understanding is that while this is a sophisticated application platform, this is not Netflix, right? This is not a born in the cloud, authored for the web software. This is like packaged software, if you will, right? Is that a fair statement?
That's a very fair statement. Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And from my experience, generally just to paint in broad brushstrokes, anything packaged that you buy from a vendor is designed to operate on the assumption that the underlying infrastructure that powers it is predictable, right, and doesn't move out from under it, right? So I imagine it's fair to say too that had a big part to play in selecting dedicated physical bare metal for this application as well, right?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you buy the licensing based upon how many cores you want to spin up from the app tier, the web tier, even on the database stack as well.
Interesting. Okay, so there is not only technical but also a financial component to the selection as well,
certainly,
based on licensing schemes. Okay, very common. Okay, very cool. And then one thing I want to point out too is we're not going to dive into it yet because we're going to get on that with Phil here shortly. But there is a RackConnect is called out in the kind of upper right quadrant of this diagram, where we do see, even though this is a dedicated infrastructure footprint, it looks like we're still offering customers a way to reach across to our public cloud in the event that they choose to use that in some fashion. So I think that's sort of a unique component to any Rackspace architecture that we can offer. So I wanted to just plant a seed there, and we'll come back to that later on in the discussion. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to kind of drill down into the different dimensions of this architecture, ranging from compute to storage to networking. So I'm going to zero in on compute first, right? So again, I see this is all physical servers. There's not even any virtualization in this solution from what I see here. Help me understand how we thought through sizing of the different physical servers for this customer.
Sure. Most commonly from an Oracle Commerce perspective, certainly from e-commerce in general, you want to know a couple of major key metrics, one being page views per second. How many page views, how many times is someone clicking through a page every single second. At your peak, certainly around, I think, Black Friday or Cyber Monday type of thing, And then also, as it relates to what licenses you've acquired, what are we able to spin up without breaking any licensing limitations?
Okay. Okay. Very cool. And I suppose too, the predictability, right, is a key dimension of the selection as well, right? Is that? I feel like I'm leading the witness here. Sorry.
Yeah. No. That's quite all right. Yeah. So predictability again. Back to this is their very first, very high visibility jump into e-commerce. So they are incredibly concerned about my user experience has got to be the exact same on, say, March 28th as it is on Cyber Monday, regardless of the workload that the environment's experiencing.
Right.
The thought of like a noisy neighbor effect that is commonly referred to in like a public cloud scenario, even like a VMware environment where you oversubscribe CPU, that was like off the table out of the gate with them.
Okay.
So it's really more about, hey, my user experience has got to be the absolute best it can be, regardless of the time of year or how many people are plugging away at it.
Okay, and that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. And I think as anyone who's sort of worked with e-commerce customers or themselves operates in the world of e-commerce knows that any dip in performance that translates into slower page loads results and is quantifiably less revenue or a loss in revenue. So consistency is key. I think again, I just to call out the application that's running here. This is not an application that can say something like, oh, I'm seeing like an increase in queue length. Let's spin up more, magic cloud servers somewhere. This is not that type of app, right? And so having infrastructure that has a consistent, reliable level of performance that can always be relied upon is, in a use case like this, when the software can't adapt itself, is critical to the mission of making money, right? So that's a good mission to have. Okay, well, very cool. I'm going to jump into the storage piece then, and if we've got any storage nerds in the audience that were really hoping for an expansive look into the storage platform and portfolio here at Rackspace, I hate to disappoint you. That's probably not what we're going to do today, but we're going to still hit the high points. We do have on the 27th of this month, we're going to have a session focused entirely on the concept of dedicated storage at Rackspace. So you want to come back for that if you're wearing an EMC shirt right now. You'll want to come back for on the 27th. Looking into storage performance requirements, though, clearly storage is at the foundation of any application that has a database at its heart, which this application does. What did the customer have to say about storage performance when they started outlining their requirements to you?
Yeah, it was really kind of a uniform statement. User experience it can easily be traced down to how fast or how slow is my storage array performing. As you may notice, as you mentioned earlier on, that all of these components are dedicated. Everything from network devices to the servers themselves, dedicated solely for the use of the customer, with exception of the enhanced shared SAN as it's shown in the diagram here. That's the only multi-tenant piece of the puzzle, and there are a lot of ways we can kind of get around and help ease the pain there. Specifically talking to them about the quality of service that we have established and the secure multi-tenancy of the platform itself.
Okay.
Just for clarity, it's an EMC VMAX on the back end, so incredibly high-end and SAN with incredible performance capabilities. So just tying off that and consuming in the signing, those LUNs appropriately is utmost importance to maintain security and certainly performance.
Okay, and this is a good thing to look at because at Rackspace it's almost overwhelming the amount of choices you have in storage, and you can get a whole entire array dedicated to yourself if you need it. But shared SAN was selected here. I'm going to editorialize a bit. I like shared SAN here because it is easy for us to deliver to our customers. It is efficient in the way that we can deliver additional performance and space and both storage and storage performance to our customers. But it's also like, hey man, you get access to VMAX functionality without having to buy a VMAX, right? And that's huge, right? If you've got really critical needs for performance or you need access to a lot of the higher order storage performance that the VMAX platform provides. So I'm a big fan. Tell me a bit about being a consumer of storage at Rackspace when you're using a dedicated storage solution, right? How, as a Rackspace customer, am I interacting with it? Am I like carving out LUNs myself and issuing arcane commands? Like, how do I get more LUNs? I need more LUNs, Kevin.
Yeah, no worries. If you love storage and just cannot let go, then we offer the ability for you to manage the arrays yourself. But it's pretty much assumed, certainly from an e-commerce perspective, when we're working with IT directors, even those in marketing that have no idea even what CLI stands for type of stuff. It's most common for us to actually manage the SAN as we do with the servers, the network devices, security components as well. But from a storage perspective, typically you just work with your account team to say, hey, expand this volume, or we need to optimize this volume, or how can we make our database faster, leveraging this volume, and it's all typically through your account team, and just using a pretty intuitive ticket system.
Okay, very cool. So, and the storage team that actually operates a SAN, if I have like really deep questions about SAN, or I really want to understand or get guidance on best practices for storage deployment, can I talk to them? Are they people that will speak to customers if needed?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, and certainly from any OLTP, any high performance database application that requires super fast SAN, there's typically some optimization, customization that goes into it, and it's not uncommon for us to engage a pretty senior lead storage engineer just to make sure that everything goes off without a clip.
Yeah.
If anything, just to hopefully ease the pain for those that are used to maybe even decades of managing storage themselves that are kind of pulled away from access to the keys.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, good. That's good to hear, because managing storage can be tricky, and especially for like in this use case, right? You need storage to be performant, and you need it to do what it needs to do. But if your mission is to like sell widgets on the web, being a storage admin doesn't necessarily further that mission, right? That's just So very cool. And again, a reminder that for the storage nerds in the room who are yelling at me that I'm not going deep enough, come back on the 27th. We're gonna get even more specific. Cool. So Phil, by the way, I just stay awake with us, buddy. We're talking about networking soon, and we're gonna get into this here, and we're gonna need your help. So. And that was my really awkward segue into the topic of networking. So real quick, again, I just want to take a moment to talk about networking in the physical bare metal world versus networking in the cloud. Cloud networking has evolved quite a bit over the last 5 years, right? You got things like Amazon VPC. Here at Rackspace, you've got cloud networks, and they are powerful tools that make managing networks in general a lot more accessible. But at the same time, the trade you make for that accessibility and programmatic control is you don't always have the access to the lower level controls that you have in the physical world. And when you're running an application that's designed to operate in this physical world, you need access to that kind of stuff. You need to live in a world of VLANs. You need to be able to do things like port mirroring and stuff for packet inspection, and that's exactly what we can offer with our dedicated networking devices here in the dedicated world. When we talk about RackConnect, in a moment, we'll also talk about how you can kind of have your cake and eat it too here at Rackspace. But quick thing I noticed when I look at this architecture diagram is we've got multiple network segments going on. This customer is actually running not just production with the different kind of web and data tiers, but they actually have a whole separate network segment for isolated dev and test. So I'm just curious, how do we do that? Like, what device is actually supplying the network segmentation in this physical architecture?
Yeah, and I mean, for this architecture, it really depends. Good IT answer. It depends. So you see the firewalls in there. Typically, we kind of carve off a lot of the VLAN at the firewall layer at the edge device. In some cases, we actually do a lot of the network segmentation at the load balancer, just considering that load balancers are a big part of all of this, certainly from the web tier. So from the diagram, you can't really tell. I think we chose to do most of it off of the F5 load balancer due to some specific network requirements from the customer themselves, and we can do that because it's all dedicated to them. We can customize it, we can carve it up however they whatever works best for them and their application, and still adhere to our best practices as when we carve those up. But as you can see here, you're right. We have production kind of in its own little network segment, and then development on the side segment. Certainly with production having a bit more quality of service above and beyond dev. And you can see even within production, we've carved it up even further. The web app tier, think of it like more as it's within a load balancing subnet as it's defined there, but really more so a public access, 480 type of access. Whereas everything else behind that gray bar is closed off from public access, and all that's managed and monitored by by an IDS, a threat management device.
Okay.
The biggest reason driving that was PCI compliance, which is very, very common as you talk e-commerce and the retention of credit card information.
Okay. So PCI controls were driving a lot of the requirements into what they were coming to Rackspace with, and then we were then using those requirements to make technology selections that would ultimately help the customer meet those objectives.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And just a quick observation here. Where's my diagram? I see in a lot of the elements, the network elements, like for the traffic manager and for the firewalls themselves, I see 2 of them, right? So I assume that doesn't just make them go twice as fast. Does that imply some sort of high availability deployment? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. So e-commerce, no single point of failure. Performance is super important, as well as uptime. Really those devices are really acting as, from a firewall and load balance perspective, as an active-passive pair. Okay. So if there's a hiccup on one, the other one will pick up, in lockstep and proceed. It also allows us to minimize or even eliminate all maintenance windows required for those network devices.
Okay.
So it doesn't make them go twice as fast. That would be awesome if it did. But it's really just there for redundancy and hopefully to abstract all sense of planned and unplanned downtime.
Okay, very cool. And then I noticed too that the traffic manager is, and Phil's I'm gonna let Phil chime in here in a moment, but I noticed that it serves 2 purposes. One, provides layer 7 content switching, right? So it does have the ability to route traffic based not only on layer 3 policy, but even layer 7 policy if need be. But it's also acting as the gateway, if you will, into our cloud networking, right? Which is its own sort of separate universe, right? So if we want traffic to kind of like speak east-west across the cloud and the public infrastructure here, you need to have some sort of device like controlling and enforcing policy for the packets that traverse east-west to the cloud and back. That's a good time to tee up Phil here. I think Phil. I'm noticing the ASA series firewalls here in the architecture diagram. Like, can you tell us a bit about the ASA line and what choices customers have with firewalling options at Rackspace?
Yeah, so thanks, Doug. So the ASA line is our bread and butter firewall here at Rackspace. We've got performance needs from customers that range from a couple megabits per second up to gigabits of throughput. So the ASA line that we deploy handles from hundreds of megabits per second traffic through the gigs. Also, from tens of thousands of packets per second up to the millions. So depending on what need the customer needs, what need of performance the customer needs on the firewall, we keep that. There are also the caveat to predictable performance, so you know what that box is going to do. To Kevin's point, in March, it's going to give you the same performance in June, July, and August as well. So the other caveat to that is it's a single tenant, so you're not sharing resources with anybody across that ASA platform.
Okay, very cool. And then I talked about the traffic management, right? In this case, we're using the F5 Big IP series appliances. They got a lot of choices just with load balancers alone here. Tell me a bit about what we offer, but also like why we might take a customer, pull them towards one solution versus another. What kind of things do we look for when we're making traffic management solutions?
Yeah, so again, what's depicted here is the F5 big IP platform. So we have a couple good synergies there. So customers that want to be able to do local traffic management, I've got 3 web servers, right, and they're going to handle traffic between web server 1, 2, and 3. So you're adding a little bit of layer resiliency there. If one of those web servers were to have a problem and or need maintenance, you can take that out of the pool, and then you can go ahead and have the traffic manager can route traffic to the available resources. The other thing, which is what we pointed out earlier, which is our RackConnect component. Say we're having a very busy day, or it's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and we wanted to spin up a couple extra cloud servers to handle some of that web traffic. We can spin up those cloud servers. They can get inserted into the pool of traffic at the F5, and traffic will automatically start routing to those. Couple days after the high peak is over, we start spinning down those servers, and then they're automatically taken out of the pool. So this you allocate those services correctly. So the load balancer or application delivery controller in this fashion handles the layer 7 functionality and can spin up and down as the customer's site needs to.
Okay. I think I'm going to jump ahead of my notes here and just talk about RackConnect a bit, and then we'll hop back into the security appliances, just because it's pretty interesting stuff. So again, you talked about the application delivery controller it sounds like it's got some it's kind of like the brains of the operation in determining what happens when we spin up instances in the cloud, right? Because a customer could just go spin up instances in our public cloud independently of all of this, right, and find creative ways to send traffic their way. But it sounds like with RackConnect, there's a more orchestrated approach, and there's some automation in the mix as well that handles a lot of the network changes behind the scenes. Tell me a bit more about that, right?
Sure.
How does RackConnect specifically intelligently determine which traffic goes to the cloud and which traffic goes to the dedicated infrastructure, and how is that different from just doing it yourself?
Sure. So let me just talk a quick moment about the RackConnect, what that does. RackConnect is a option for customers to use when they have cloud resources and connect them to our dedicated resources, which is something unique in the industry today. So you can have your, as depicted here, your dedicated servers and cloud servers all sitting in the same load balancing pool. So that's one of the big advantages of RackConnect. So the orchestration behind there, we use the application delivery controller to be the mechanism to put all the resources together, and like you mentioned, to be the brains of the operation. So once you build that out and get that rule set the first time, it's going to follow traffic patterns. And you can say when we reach 80% utilization, spin up another server, and so then those servers can get spun up in the web. You can do it manually yourself, but again, now you're spinning up those servers and adding those into pools, and there's some downtime for that stuff. The way we automatically do it, if you will, through RackConnect, allow the customer to concentrate more on their business side of things, set the rule set so that if we hit a certain spike of traffic, more servers are spun up. As that performance is no longer required, we can go ahead and start spinning some of those services down as well. And some of that is at customer discretion and automatically based on some of the rule sets and put into the application delivery controllers, specifically the F5 in this case.
Okay. So in summary, then, some of the key points of what this provides is I can add cloud resources to a load balancing pool based on policy that we set, and then in addition to that, it will automatically take resources out of the pool when those events sort of expire, right? And probably most importantly, it sounds to me, tell me if I'm right here, is that this gives me a way to subject any traffic that is handled by these cloud resources to the inspection and network access control policy that I have in place with the physical devices that protect my physical infrastructure. Is that fair?
Yeah, you kind of touched on a little bit of the security stuff there. With the way we have this this particular architecture designed is that the cloud resources go application delivery controller and the dedicated environment, so that that traffic can be inspected by the items that are listed on the security sections here, the alert logic, threat manager, and log management devices, as well as the Imperva WAF here.
Okay, and I think that that's pretty unique, right? I call this out because it's an interesting way of sort of having your cake and eating it too. You if you need to, if you find a way, like for in this customer's example, I don't think they used any of our cloud resources day one, but over time, if they found a compelling subcomponent of their application that would be suitable for the public cloud, they could move it out there, but they wouldn't have to give up all of the benefits that they get with the physical networking architecture and the appliances they have in the mix in the physical world, right? So these aren't two different silos of infrastructure that they have to reconcile. All sort of north-south traffic still flows to these devices, and those devices can maintain that security policy is applied to all that traffic, even though it's in the clouds, right? So there's not a lot of other ways you can achieve that at providers that don't have some sort of like hybrid connectivity option like we have here.
Correct.
Very cool. Let me jump back to my notes here as well. And actually, I need to take a moment. I forgot to remind folks that if you have questions, please do submit them through the Q&A tool, and I promise you we'll get to them here shortly. But that's the best way to reach us. If you're watching live right now, submit them through the Q&A function of the Google Hangout. So I'm going to jump back into the security networking components. So I see an Imperva web application firewall. How is that different from a Cisco ASA firewall? What is that adding to the architecture here?
Yeah, so again, jump on a little bit of a soapbox here around security. You want to put as many layers of security between you and potential bad guys as you can, so the firewall protects you from certain level of attacks, and you can you can change people and allow certain access through your firewall. What the Imperva WAF does is it looks at a different layer, layer 7 traffic. So as this was a web commerce application, so folks trying to do either cross-site scripting and or SQL injections, instead of looking at the catalog trying to find out the customer base behind that catalog, those are threats that the WAF would be able to look at. And you couple that with what's listed here is the alert logic threat manager. Typically Susie from accounting doesn't really log into firewalls, so if Susie logged in from her normal day-to-day, all of a sudden Susie's trying to log into the external firewalls, that could throw up a big red flag. Those are some of the things that the threat manager can dictate for you and look at things that are happening. Log management obviously is another component to that. Anytime that Susie tried to log into the firewall and her password failed, so that's another alert. So again, what these components are designed to do is put layers of security in between the bad guys and you, and this way you can protect your network and at least have the ability to say, hey, if there was something that happened, you can go backtrack and find out who did it, when it happened, and be able to facilitate remediation of potential attacks.
Okay. And so I imagine, you guys keep me honest, that when you start incorporating all these devices in the mix, especially security devices, right? If I were doing this myself in my own data center and I bought an appliance off the shelf, I plugged it in with sort of default policy, I imagine this thing is just spewing alerts everywhere, and it's like, it's great. I solved the problem of not having, alerting, but now I have this new problem, which is what in the world am I going to do with all these alerts, right? Like, what is this? Like, PC load letter. So that comes into management of these devices, right? Our customers, again, we're not just putting it in the rack and saying, here it is, have fun. We're actually delivering a managed experience for their customers. Can you tell me a bit about what that means for a Rackspace customer who's using this technology?
Yeah. So all of these appliances are all managed by Rackspace, our NetSec teams and net operations teams, and our security support teams. So depending on which device it is, which group has the knowledge to handle that stuff. The other point to your observation there is if you plug this in, also you get a lot of alerts, and you don't know what to do with them. The other side of that coin is you may plug it in and get no alerts because it isn't doing anything, right?
Right.
Just by plugging something in and not understanding how to configure it, you put a lot of money into a device that basically heats your data center up and costs you a bunch of money. So what our expertise does is wrap around best practices, for our NetSec teams and our security support teams. This way, you know it's tried and true that are available. Our NetSec team is available 24/7, and you're getting best practices, right? We deploy over 20,000 firewalls today, so we know how to deploy a firewall. We can do that, at the drop of a hat. Most of those NetSec folks can do that, in their sleep, if you will. So that's the expertise that you guys or customers are relying on Rackspace to provide to them on these devices. That yes, you can go buy them off the shelf, but if you don't properly configure them, you basically just threw a bunch of money at something.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that's a point that kind of really hits close to home for me as someone who has, but in different parts of my career, worked at other service providers where, we're not just like throwing the customer to the wolves, giving them an appliance and saying, hope you have fun. Here's some docs, right? We are learning through each and every customer that we bring on board at Rackspace, as we get exposure to their use cases and needs. Our collective knowledge grows and has been growing now for over a decade, and we apply those lessons learned to each new customer that comes on board, right? And then on top of that, you don't take our word for it. You can talk to these people. You can talk to them before you're a Rackspace customer if you really want to test us and make sure we know what we're talking about. Our sales staff will be glad to pull them on the phone for you. But yeah, this is good stuff because, again, I think especially when it comes to security, right? You don't just want to check the box and have the device. You want to have these things tuned, and tuning them is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing cycle, right? As we begin to understand the nature of your patterns, establishing baselines for what normal looks like for your very unique use case, in order to maximize your investment in these devices that you have sitting in the rack with us, they need to be constantly tuned and optimized over time. And again, like the storage team, you can get these guys on the phone, and that's one of the best parts about working here and being a customer. Let me make sure I'm covering all my topics here. It looks like we've got some questions. So before we dive into the questions, why don't I go ahead and just kind of summarize my takeaways. What I'm hearing from the discussion is that, for this customer, they had a lot of choices. This application, it could have been dropped into the public cloud. It's not that it wouldn't run. That's not in question, and nobody's arguing with that. And there are ways in which this could have been constructed. But for this customer, there were certain dimensions of the requirements that really made a dedicated approach like a clear winner. And it sounds to me what I heard was that one was just economics, right? This is a packaged app that had a licensing model that was sort of assumed a physical infrastructure model, right? And pricing in the cloud would probably get sort of hairy. There was another key piece of the theme was predictability and reliability, right? There are situations where you want to plan for the lack of predictability, right? I've got seasonal workloads that grow and shrink, all the cool cloud stuff that we know about and love to talk about. But not everybody lives in that world. Not every workload is actually going to benefit from that. It actually makes their life harder. And so predictability being the key focus that drove us to a dedicated architecture here. And control, right? Security, I kind of put security and control in sort of the same bucket. But security led us down this path because we've got a wide body of expertise and products that operate well in the dedicated world when you need things like real-time packet inspection and threat monitoring and log management. We can actually utilize dedicated single-tenant appliances to meet those needs, as opposed to trying to do that with, say, a virtual appliance in a cloud world, right? And customizability, right? There's almost no limit to the things we can build in the dedicated physical world, because we really can craft a bespoke, custom-tailored solution in the physical world that you don't always get when you make the trades that you do for a public cloud architecture. Did I get any of that wrong? You guys agree with all that, or anything you want to add?
No, that's great. Good.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so we've got some questions here that I'm gonna open up here. Just give me a moment to sort of sift through them. I've got. I'm going to read them out though, because not everyone will be watching this live. Some people will be watching this on demand. One question is there any encryption in flight or at rest provided by any elements of the solution? I'm sort of paraphrasing here.
Yeah, no. The biggest part of the encryption was the retention of the credit card information, which typically lays at the database tier.
Okay.
And that actually kind of mitigated and minimized any concern over using multi-tenant SAN. They actually are encrypting at the database, just leveraging native Oracle database utilities. I do not recall any other encryption in flights or at rest.
Okay. Okay, but all transit from application servers to that encrypted database being handled by the database was occurring over dedicated single-tenant network infrastructure, even
exactly
at the physical layer, right?
Exactly right.
Okay, very cool. Okay, and then I've got another one. This one says, it's a multi-part. Hang on, I'm gonna come back to that one. I kind of sort it out. And what is the? Okay, we touched on this a little bit. What is the balance between Rackspace and customer ownership when we talk about network device management? I think we touched on this a little bit, but we can kind of go in a bit deeper here. This is both for you, Kevin, and for Phil.
Yes, and let me start with that one, and then Kevin, if you want to jump in at the end. So we have the ability to work with our network teams, our NetSec team, to work on firewall load balancer configurations. We also have a firewall control panel where customers can, if they choose to and update role and profiles there. But again, if customers want to be 100% hands-off, we have that option. And then for the customers that do want to dive into some of the configuration, they have the ability to do it through our firewall control panel and our MyRack portal ability with that. We are making strides, and we're going to be introducing the load balancer control panel here in 2016 for customers. So they're going to start being able to do some of those things in the firewall.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. It sounds so. I mean, generally the general approach is that it's all managed, right? But we recognize that there are some customers whose needs are different, and we don't want to force ourselves in their way necessarily. So we want to continue to evolve self-service for those that don't necessarily need our help. But in the meantime, if you do need all of our help, we're more than happy to give it to you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Actually, I have a good amount of questions here, so pardon me. Some of them are multi-parts. I'm just having to try to assemble them in my head in real time. Getting one thing I want to note. So we're touching on security. We're getting some questions around compliance in general and the impact of multi-tenancy. I will note that we do have upcoming sessions that are listed on the landing page for this series that are going to go real deep into topics of compliance. So if we don't quite answer your question the way you hope today, note that we'll get you on the next go around when we actually drill into that topic specifically. So, and this particular question has to do with PCI compliance as it relates to cloud servers when we talk about a hybrid solution. What impact does that have if you're using hybrid and public cloud as part of the solution? What impact does that have on achieving compliance goals? I'll make a statement, which is that this is 9 times out of 10 we really look at separating the pieces of a workload into the homes, we place components of a workload into the infrastructure that is more appropriate if we're looking at when we're looking at a customer's overall compliance goals. So for instance, if you've got an e-commerce app, right, that encompasses, like catalog items and SKUs and back office tracking and order, management, right, and then you've got payment transaction processing, right, some components of that might be perfect for the multi-tenant cloud. I would suggest let's keep payment processing out of there. Is there a way to maybe make everything work so that you can pass an audit? I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's a pretty high risk proposition, right? So I would, the way we do this oftentimes for customers who have to process their own transactions, they generally 9 times out of 10, that's going to live in a dedicated infrastructure with a series of compensating controls that will allow them to meet to increase their probability of passing an audit, right? And then we use a lot of the what we do use is a lot of the, when we talked about RackConnect and how it gives you the ability to have controls when it comes to traffic isolation and access control policy between your dedicated infrastructure and the cloud. Again, we use that in order to build the compensating controls criteria to hopefully get a customer across the finish line on an audit. So I hope that answers the question. Guys, if there's anything you want to add to that, I'm in marketing these days, so I'm a little soft.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on all the major points. I'll just kind of hone in on one point is the luxury of being an SC at Rackspace is you have the option of going dedicated or multi-tenant. Everything else just screams dedicated, so it was a really simple discussion to have with them. With that in mind, and RackConnect we have the luxury of having RackConnect there to stem into the public cloud. As long as you have confidence in the code that you've built, the infrastructure that you've built around it, and security devices, scrubbing all of it for you, there's really all not that much of a concern stemming into a public cloud, but it's just we have the luxury of deploying dedicated in this fashion.
Okay. Good stuff. And again, for those of you that really want to dig into it, we're going to have an upcoming session where you're going to have actual people who do this for a profession. I dabble in it, kind of like I dabble in fixing cars. Mileage may vary. Some stuff I just outsource to professionals. So, well, if that doesn't meet your needs, come back. We're gonna go into that in more detail. Let's see here. Here's another one. With all the networking hardware options on offer, what would the growth strategy look like when upgrading to bigger, more feature-rich gear? Right. So, how do customers, as their needs grow, what's it like for them when they outgrow an appliance and need to move to something bigger? How does that actually take place?
Yeah, absolutely. And fill in any gaps if I don't hit anything. But effectively, we have a whole line of ASA firewalls. If you look at the diagram, I think it's a 5515X. So pretty much the entry-level X series, and it's anticipated that while this is day one deployment for this customer, obviously with peak, traffic throughput connections under concern, if they get to the point where they need to stem up to a 5525X or even a 45X, they're able to do that with a tiny maintenance window just to deploy additional firewalls or move them up a class. And all that, holds true not just for the network tiers, but also the storage tier and the servers themselves. But specific to the network devices, the edge device is typically the one that we upgrade the most. And we have a whole line of ASAs that can, Phil, maybe the max throughput that we can achieve, or even the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of connections we can achieve with the ASA X series.
Yeah, you touched on everything there. The one thing, especially on the diagram that we're working here for this specific customer, we did deploy in an HA fashion. So if there was a need to go from a 5515 to a 5525, we can deploy the 5525s and have everything set in place. Grab that config, move it over, and then just swing traffic over, whether that's via IP or interface activity. This way, there's no downtime for those kind of moves. So as customers go up the stack in performance on the firewall. The other side of the coin, maybe just to touch on just a hair, because we did talk about the F5s. Some of the F5s have more feature capability as you go up the stack, where they do some things in software on the lower end devices, and they do some high calculation traffic in hardware on the higher end devices. So that's kind of some of the things we also offer. We kind of get the T-shirt size, small, medium, and large devices in a portfolio, so that customers that want the entry level performance because they don't know what's going to happen on day one. We have the cost-effective solutions for you. There's also customers that come in and say, hey, I know I'm going to do 3 gigs worth of traffic on day one. Okay, well, we're not going to give you the low-end devices. We're going to give you the high-end stuff because you have the predictable traffic. So we have the ability to provide each of the different T-shirt sizes for the folks from an initial configuration as well as you move up the stack.
Awesome, thanks. And just real quick, I do want to thank our viewers for the questions they're providing. This is great, so keep them coming, and we'll do our best to answer all of them if time allows. I will do a quick time check. We've got about 5 minutes until I need to begin wrapping up, so we'll do a few more questions, and then anything that we miss, again, you can email us at the customercare@rackspace.com email address to reach us directly, and we'll get back to you offline. One thing to note, I've got a good question here about storage, Kevin. Maybe you can help us answer this. So what we're seeing here is we know that the VMAX supports multiple tiers of storage that can be delivered in a pool, right? You know, across SSD, SAS, SATA tiers, right? And it magically determines how to distribute load across the tiers and cache stuff. Is when we look at our shared SAN solution running on a VMAX, is that are they getting access to that kind of stuff? What are we exposing to the customer?
We're exposing, effectively from the customer perspective, we assign them a LUN, and those LUN or LUNs have specific sizes of volumes, 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, maybe 550 gig,
okay,
maybe 15 terabytes. They basically get access to the capacity, the quantity of gigs, as well as the class, as defined by what lies within that capacity tier.
Okay.
So think bronze, silver, and gold are the classes of tiers that we have defined. Typically, from an e-commerce perspective, the database lives on nothing but the gold, the very best, which is fronted with a big fat and cache. A lot of QoS going on there, as well as lives on volumes of SSD and 10K, pooled by the logic that's in the fast suite of code in the VMAX itself.
Okay, and so let's say there's an event at which there's, I don't know, this customer gets audited for some reason, and there's just a ton of unexpected reporting going on, or a ton of unexpected write traffic for some, I don't know, make up a reason, right? The storage pooling in effect, let's say they subscribe to the bronze tier for a 1 gig LUN. That's a silly gig, whatever, a gig. It's a gig LUN, Kevin. Don't ask me why.
Okay.
But as it gets hammered on, is that VMAX then going to respond and the scheduler is going to replace data on the appropriate tier as needed? Sorry, does this question even make sense?
No. So each one of the tiers. So from our enhanced shared SAN, and that's why it makes so much sense to sell on kind of the lower end without getting into the granularities of storage itself. But
sure,
we tier all pools of storage. Bronze, silver, and gold. Okay. It's just a matter of how fast, how many SSDs do we throw at it, how much cache do we throw at it, depending on each of those tiers.
And these are all things that we take into account when we make the design selection, right?
Exactly.
We talked to, okay, got it. And again, we're going to go deeper into storage on the 27th. So again, if we're missing the mark on our answer here, come back, and we will definitely have even more storage expertise available to us. And let's see here. Just looking at one more. Okay, I'm gonna handle this multi-part question here. So, using hosting provider. Okay, so this question is higher level. This listener is growing and looking at using a hosting provider, and they're considering the move. I guess the question is more along the lines of, hey, I do a lot of this stuff in-house today, but we think we're ready to actually move to a service provider. What kinds of new things do I need to think about that I may take for granted when I run this myself in my own data center, right? What should what's different about the experience that I should be prepared for?
Wow, great question, and thanks for asking. We could go on. We'd have another hour of discussion there. I would say relative to establishing what your pains are today with that application, if you're looking to move it off, or you're just trying to figure out what to do or get out of the data center business, what are your applications going to live on today? What's gotten you to that point? What pains have you had, and what have you tried that's failed in the past? And to take all of that into consideration as you discuss, okay, now what do we want all of this to look like in 12 months, 36 months? So it's kind of really more so where have you been and where do we want to go? Mm-hmm. And from that, you're going to kind of be able to determine, okay, this application is incredibly finicky, don't touch it, keep it on bare metal, or it lives in VMware, so don't even think about pulling it out of VMware, just kind of lift and shift it. Or, hey, you know what, this application is 10 years old, we need to look into re-architecting or rebuilding it in general. What technologies are available to you as you look on-prem or even at a hosting provider? Do they have access into a hybrid, extension into moving from dedicated into public cloud? Or do they have access to a PaaS, or what what assistance will I get from security or even DevOps perspective? It's
Yeah.
again, we can go on for an hour
I,
on this, but
yeah, I imagine there are a infinite universe of inputs that could impact the way that conversation goes with any given customer that comes to speak to us.
Yeah, one thing too, Doug, is something to think about because between Rackspace and something you're going to do on your own. If you design a workload today at your premise and you do it with dual core procs, for instance, on a server, you're kind of stuck there. At Rackspace, if your workload gets larger and you can swap out that 2-core box for a 4-core box or a quad or octa-core, whatever you need, you don't have to go back and say, hey, I just spent $3,000 on a server. And kind of put it into the garbage can and go buy another $5,000 server. At Rackspace, you can just upscale, take out server with 2 cores and upgrade that to quad cores, and away you go.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to talk about this for a second because this comes up a lot where, I'd be sitting in a room as an SE years ago with a bunch of technical folks, and they're really grilling me on a bunch of, the merits of the solution we're proposing. And what would happen inevitably is I'd be like, look, the benefit of working with us is that the cost of being wrong goes way down, right? Like, even if we get this wrong, us or any service provider, at least ones that are like customers, the cost of getting the architecture wrong is less, because if you size the SAN wrong and you grow out of it faster than you thought you would, you're not on the hook like holding this frame in your data center going like, well, now what? Let's go buy another one. Like, in our model, you just grow into it and we reuse your old stuff, right? So you're not carrying the stuff on your books for 3 years wishing you'd bought bigger from EMC or NetApp or whoever it may be, right? So that alone is very powerful, and if you need to change, you can. And while it's dedicated infrastructure, you get this almost like cloud-like benefit of being able to change without, again, having to bear the cost of change as heavily as if you did this in your own data center. Sorry, Kevin, I totally interrupted you though.
No, that's okay. All I was going to note was, Phil, and you had given examples of, okay, you scale out of it, but what if you just grossly oversized, the handful of servers that you deployed, all quad-core, 18-core systems, and he was like, you know what, I just need a couple of cores on 2 systems. That's an option as well. You have not sunk the capital into monster servers that are just going to collect dust for you. Okay.
Excellent. Well, guys, we've got about 3 minutes left, and so I need to jump to closing comments. So let's see. We're going to have something flip up on the screen here that I'll speak to you here in a sec. But before, as that's going up, I just want to say thank you to our listeners. Thanks to everyone who joined today and took time out of their day to sit and listen to 3 dudes talk about servers and gear. Thanks to our guest, Kevin. Kevin is one of those people that is out there talking to customers all day, every day, and is just a pure joy to work with. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and away from your customers to talk to dudes like me. And Phil as well, you're out there doing really great stuff with networking, helping ensure that our customers have choice, right, and have the tools they need to meet their goals. So thank you for bringing your expertise to the Hangout today, but also for the work that you do. It's been great working with you guys, and thanks to our listeners, of course, for showing up. And again, any questions you have, please send them out to customercare@rackspace.com. You can reach me and my team here, and we'll get answers back to you. Please visit the links here up on the screen. You can go to visit the deep dive schedule to see what else is coming down the pipe. And if there's anything that interests you, please attend. But also share it, right? If you like this today and you thought this was a good use of your time, please do share this on social media and send people, direct people to come check this out and talk to us. And finally, there's a blog post out there that we'll be updating in real time where we recap the highlights from the show. Oh, and finally, for real this time, the reference architecture we discussed today is available for download, so you can go check that out, take a look at it in more detail, share it with your friends and family, let them know how cool Rackspace is. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you next week.